Welcome to episode 53 of the Tomato Timer, and I'm joined today with Romanian-born Manchester-bred Alex, co-founder and CEO at Dicey Tech. Alex studied business management at the University of Manchester, and with Dicey Tech, he aims to inspire and enable students to explore curiosities and create a better world in the fourth industrial revolution. Alex, it's so good to have you. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Zubair. I'm well. I'm just about to get on a plane to Paris, actually.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for finding the time to speak with us today. I guess the first question that comes out is that you are now running a startup which is really deeply integrated with technology and working in this space. After studying business, how did you end up back in there?
So I did, after studying business, I worked as a strategy consultant for a bit, and it was a really interesting career. You get to learn a lot of things. You get to work with different people at different kind of seniority levels across different industries. There's a lot of variety to it. So I wanted to learn more. So I did a master's in business strategy, also at the Uni of Manchester. And for my dissertation, I was doing a consulting project for a tech startup, and I kind of got a bit deeper into under the hood, and I kind of realized I don't know much about technology per se. So I wanted to learn, and I tried a whole host of coding platforms. I learned a bit of Python, but nothing really too applicable. It wasn't really engaging. And then one of my friends suggested I buy a 3D printer. So I bought a very cheap Chinese do-it-yourself kit. Had to put everything together myself. Blew up the power fuse a couple of times. Had to get some spare parts. It was a messy process, but in the end, I got there. And once I printed like a tiny pyramid, which was already preloaded, so I just hit a button and it came out, and I was like, that's amazing. It felt like having infinite Lego, and I could create anything. So I was really keen to learn how to make my own remote control car. So I learned how to 3D design and how to write Python code, how to work with electronics in less than a month. And I made my own toy, basically. And it was such an engaging process. I kind of realized, wait, I learned how to code. I learned basics of 3D design and how to build a prototype and how to create stuff. This should exist. This should exist in schools. And that was kind of the first piece of insight that led to creating the creation of Dicey Tech. At the time, I reconnected with my co-founder, Sofian, who I met in first year of university on the basketball team. And he had just graduated from mechatronic engineering. He was working at Thales. He was a systems architect. And we just started talking a bit more about the idea that neither of us really knew what we wanted to do when we were in school. We didn't get much of an insight into the real world through our studies. And once we graduated, we were kind of thrown into the deep end. And even when we chose our subject, Sofian chose mechatronic because it was kind of the intersection between electronics, mechanics, some software. He didn't really know what he wanted to do. I chose business because, again, I had no idea. So I just wanted to kind of get a bit of experience into different areas and see how I can apply that. And we realized that there's an issue in education that it's totally disconnected from what's happening in the real world. And innovation is advancing exponentially. By the time teachers try to catch up and teach the new content, the new knowledge that's being built on the front line, that new knowledge becomes obsolete. So there's a kind of a big gap that's increasingly growing.
Yeah. I think you touched upon 2 points though, and I'd love to kind of see why you connected the two when you launched Dicey Tech. One is obviously the missing connection in terms of what we learn at school and what the world in reality is like. And I'll go as far as to say what we learn at university and what the world of industry is like, because even then we are sometimes siloed away from reality. And the other piece that you talked about, and the thing that you were able to achieve with your 3D printer, was a very hands-on project-based approach. Why are those two things interlinked, and what is the magic that happens when you take project-based learning as a methodology and as a pedagogy to approach learning?
It's a very good question. The whole thing about project-based learning and hands-on learning in general, it adds another kinesthetic component to your experience. So if you engage, the more senses you engage when you learn something or when you do something, the better the chances of you understanding or remembering it, or you being engaged with it. So that's why hands-on learning is very captivating, and it kind of gets you in. and then being able to contextualize that learning experience within a project that is linked with a real world kind of context or a real world outcome makes it so much more useful and applicable. And then the whole aspect of 3D printing, you can kind of make anything. Not really. You still have constraints
Mm-hmm.
in the way that the machine works, but compared to traditional design, well, compared to traditional manufacturing methods, which weren't really accessible for anyone in their own kind of bedroom, design constraints would be totally different. So you didn't have so much freedom to create stuff. But now with the 3D printer, you can actually create a whole host of different things. And because of that, you can actually link it with different industries. So from our perspective, you can learn how to design and make a train or a drone or a rocket or a boat or smart devices or a range of different things. And whilst doing that, you kind of learn similar skills in terms of programming and designing and etc. and kind of the process of creating something. But you also get insights into the industry that you're kind of building that prototype or product towards, which is quite fascinating. And we try to contextualize that. So we create curriculum for secondary schools,
Yeah.
and we go as low as year 7 and 8. And for some of those, we even embed, let's say, a project as an autonomous vehicle, for example, for year 9s. And the introduction of that project is actually a bit of a background into the fourth industrial revolution, the history of the industrial revolutions, actually, and how we got to having cars the way that we have them today, and how are they becoming autonomous. So give them a bit of context, which is really captivating and kind of puts it into perspective why they're learning this, why they're making this, why is it useful and relevant. And we see engagement soaring. So I think that answers your question, like how the two worlds connect.
It does, and it kind of brings to mind the fact that most of us are carrying around some form of a device every single day, but the innovation that led to getting there is still so far out of our reach. And we don't expect everyone to become an electric and electronic engineer to understand what exactly is, what are the kind of the semiconductors and components that come to put it together. But I guess what even some of the I remember back when I was in, I think, year 2 or 3, we had this like robot which you had to like program with like a bunch of little colors, and it would follow the colors and move in a certain pattern. And the kind of the I feel like at school, and I didn't take engineering much further. I went down the math route, so even further abstract. It seems like what we're learning at school, even if we're messing around with like electrical components and bulbs and switches, it's so far removed from what we're actually using on a day-to-day basis. And I love how you introduce, how you contextualize it, because the car today is just a huge marvel in engineering. And there's so many steps to get towards that, and it's almost like it's overwhelming to kind of capture and understand. I don't know. I can see how like kind of sharing that story is helpful, but what about in general for consumers, for people like me who aren't maybe engineer or technically inclined in that sense? Um, what do we do in terms of, do we need to be educated in that front, and how has your kind of program been able to at least inform better decision making when it comes to career decisions?
Uh, there's quite a bit to unpack there. I think
Definitely,
for
yeah. Sorry about that.
no problem. It's a good question overall. I think in terms of general kind of technology education, I think you hit the nail on the head. Not everyone needs to be a software developer or a
Hmm.
CAD engineer, but I think the ability to understand the language of computers, which are becoming ubiquitous everywhere around us, pretty much kind of gives you superpowers in a way.
Yeah.
Being able to understand how things around you work, because it means you can start creating things. So that kind of empowers you to maybe pursue a career down a specific field,
Hmm.
which is becoming more and more kind of in demand, and it's becoming more high paying. There's a shortage in that space, so there's a lot of opportunity to go that route. But not just that, if just kind of learning the basics of technology, the basics of how things work, helps you not be susceptible to, I suppose, to vulnerabilities, to attacks. We're
Hmm.
seeing a lot more cyber attacks happening, especially to like older generations, because they're a bit behind in terms of um,
Digital natives now.
exactly.
Hmm.
There is kind of that digital divide is becoming more and more apparent, and that leads to a lot of potential issues. So I do think, going back circle, I do think it's useful for kids and people from a young age to learn how technology works.
Hmm.
They don't have to become developers, but it is useful to know that they have that option if they want to, and also yeah, just be a bit more empowered in terms of how they make decisions.
Yeah, I concur with that, and then to share my experiences, although again, very technical degree, and I am a scientific programmer, but those concepts and abilities of being able to develop a Python program actually impacts and affects the way I take my day-to-day decisions, because this algorithmic way of thinking is always applicable, whether it's within a IDE or in real life, because you need to take certain decisions. You're making those if statements always. You are in certain oh, maybe there's a while loop going on every single day that you're in part of.
Yeah,
Everything around you is essentially running on these pieces of code, so it's intrinsically part of our lives. It seems inconsistent to not have that basic knowledge of what is operating around us. And I feel like it's been these steps and these these skills of at least being able to break down a program, modularize. These concepts are applicable so much more beyond just programming in computer science or even technology, that it makes so much sense to promote and to develop it further. I guess the kind of the follow-up I want to ask on this is I can't remember the right statistic, but it's something ridiculously high where we're going to see current jobs going obsolete, and technology is going to take over so much of it. This fourth industrial revolution, which we're part of, or is coming, or is we can't ever. When you're in a revolution, you can't tell you're in a revolution, right? At least in an abstract one. So we have this fear of, like, we all need to become computer science students or be able to program. Um, I guess I want to my question or my kind of rumination is that, do we all need to become these like highly kind of uh programming, like we have those skill sets just in that same context of developing apps or softwares or websites, or are there other ways of applying these skills in the future? I have a kind of my own inclination to answer this question, which is why I'm asking it. But I wonder what you think. Like, we talked a little bit about this. There is a basic necessity of having this knowledge, but is it always in the same context of, like, very specifically, oh, let's develop a website, or let's build an app or something like that? Or have you, as a startup, an entrepreneur, seen it apply in many other cases?
it's a very good question, actually. The whole point about this is, so learning how to think algorithmically, or as you kind of put it, is
Hmm.
super useful, because when you create an algorithm, when you create a program, you are very careful about the assumptions that you make. And I think
Yeah.
that's a like a critical, it basically comes down to critical thinking. And if you're able to kind of map out the decisions that you make, and the way that you think about a specific topic or a specific field, and manage to stay aware of the blind spots or the potential assumptions that you make, that will definitely help you. If, first of all, it makes you a bit more humble, and you know that, wait, I might be wrong when I'm thinking about this, and sorry, I'm
Hmm.
kind of taking it specifically. So I think that there's a big application of this in just the current political economy, I suppose. So in the whole political discourse, there's a lot of polarity around a lot of subjects. There's a lot of noise, a lot of people arguing on
Hmm.
both sides, left and right, and most people are probably on the same page. They just can't really communicate properly.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that comes down to critical thinking, and they don't necessarily, a lot of people don't necessarily think that, oh, I might be wrong in this. I might have made an assumption here. So I think that's kind of a hugely um, relevant area where being able to think like a programmer would really help. Not just a programmer, but a designer as well. When you design something,
Mm-hmm.
you start off with the the goal that you have. You break it down into specific things, specific requirements that that goal kind of consists of,
Mm-hmm.
and then you take an iterative approach. You try to do kind of like the basic version that would satisfy those requirements,
Yeah.
see what works, see what doesn't, do it again, try to improve and iterate and iterate and iterate. And again, that comes down to the same kind of thought process of not making assumptions or being aware of the assumptions that you make, being humble that you might make mistakes, and
Mm-hmm.
just trying to continuously learn and learn and learn and improve. So I think it just having that mindset is applicable in terms of politics. It's applicable for your own personal development, regardless of what kind of field you want to go into. And kind of ultimately, I think if people, the people that won't be able to kind of realize the benefits of thinking this way will be left behind, and there's going to be a bit more of a disparity between the ones that do become aware of these aspects, these ways of learning and kind of thinking, and the people
Mm-hmm.
that don't. And from our perspective, we try to embed that into the educational system to give everyone a fair shot. But sometimes it's a bit of an uphill battle, considering the way that the educational system is structured. But that's a totally different topic.
Yeah. I loved what you said in that kind of in the middle of your piece where you said you can keep learning, 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 and this is kind of the perspective I had, which you've kind of confirmed for me, and I'd wonder what you think as well. But if we do head to a world where our jobs are not as clearly defined as they are right now, we're not going to have um, accountants and people doing very rote tasks. The only thing we will need to be good at is learning new things and being able to design, develop, iterate, and do it all over
And
again.
that, yeah,
And I think that the kind of the algorithmic approach of working in the way programmers, and as absolutely right, designers working under their constraints but satisfying certain requirements, and then obviously satisfying the needs and everything. um, you are developing the skills to be able to thrive in an economy where we are very unsure about what the future looks like. We might need hugely different roles. We might not have very fixed jobs anymore, and we can see that after the pandemic with people working from home remotely, being able to deliver
correct.
the value that they need to deliver without actually doing a lot of like hands-on tasks. And I don't think everything is going to go away. I'm also I'm not a futurist in the sense that humans will just sit back and technology will do everything for them. I think we have a huge um, there's the biggest beauty in humanity is that creativity we bring to everything, right? And without life would be quite bland. So um, that algorithm is really helpful in how we structure and argue and think, but also at the same time, we need to remember that creativity, that the bursts of color and life and flowers and butterflies, that's what makes humans humans, and we need to foster that. And that's what the future of our work will look like. So I don't know, this is kind of like a
Absolutely.
rambling that I've gone down, but does that fit with what you think, and the reason why it's so critical that we develop the skills but also no miss out on the creative components of it all?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And if you just look back at kind of the evolution of the economy and the evolution of jobs,
Hmm.
when kind of during the first industrial revolution, when the kind of the concept of mechanization
Yeah.
came about, and our ability to kind of harness steam energy to power machines to kind of create things, we work became extremely labor intensive.
Hmm.
Although it well, not really. It kind of it empowered us um, to create more output, whilst the machines were doing part of the heavy load, but we were still doing a good amount of the heavy load. Since then, with every kind of industrial revolution cycle, there's been more and more automation. So every time that kind of happened, and it's obviously easy to kind of talk about this now retrospectively,
Hmm.
but every time that happened, people would panic that the machines are taking their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know that that didn't necessarily happen. Every kind of wave of industrial revolution was followed by a short kind of slump in jobs, but then a proliferation of other jobs because people had more money, more free time, and that's kind of how services started to boom a bit more. And um, at the same time, a lot of people started to find ways making a living by being creative and by applying their own curiosity to things. And I think right now we're probably at by far at the peak of this, with the explosion in Web 3.0 technologies and blockchain, and particularly NFTs. In the US, there's so many. There's a growing proportion of money, a growing proportion of people that are making such a high income from NFTs and digital assets that they're completely stopping from going to work, and that kind of has effects on the supply of labor in specific industries. So, for example, even in the UK, truck drivers, we're missing truck drivers. We don't have enough truck drivers, and as a result, the supply chain is taking a hit. And you can see that in supermarkets, you can see that in many different places, and it's all over the news. A lot of truck drivers, because of the poor conditions of work and low pay in some instances, are choosing to try to either invest some of the money that they have into stocks or other kind of assets, or they try to find coding boot camps, upskill themselves, and find jobs in different areas. So I think technology is becoming more and more of an enabler for people to kind of pursue their creative passions. And I don't think we can really predict what's about to happen over the next decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really interesting. What are some of the most exciting projects that you've been able to deliver to your students? Because I heard bits and pieces of autonomous cars and drones, and they all sound like super, super cool. But what's the most exciting one, and how did that come kind of like, what was the reaction when you worked with the students to develop it?
I think the most the biggest one, the most impactful one was, it's called Intro to Rails. So we have our company is kind of focused on, right now is mostly focused on connecting with large employers, and creating programs that are designed to based on hands-on projects that are designed to inspire kids to think about careers in that space. Rail is a particularly interesting industry because it has £100 billion worth of investment committed over the next 10 years. They have about, I think the average age is 53 or 54
Wow.
for an engineer, and only 16% of the workforce is female. So they have a massive shortage in terms of skills and talent. They foresee, I think, about 120,000 people needed over the next 10 years. So they have a problem, and they're kind of fully aware of that. And we've created this program to work with years 8 and 9 students, kind of about the time where they make decisions about what they might want to do in the future, and very importantly, when they make decisions about what they're going to study for GCSEs. So the program is kind of aimed at them, and the goal is to create the best high-speed railway network. We send them a box of components, and they get access to the projects on our platform. They work in teams, and they create a high-speed track, signaling, a signaling app, stations, and a customer experience app. So there's kind of like a range of skills and knowledge that they get to learn from these projects. And there's like a baseline of each project, and then they have challenges. So for example, for the train, an added challenge is to set the fastest lap time, which means that they have to reverse engineer the code and either increase the speed overall or make it manual so that they can increase and decrease the speed right before a turn so that the train doesn't derail.
Yeah.
And it leads into real world challenges. So I think that's the most interesting and impactful one that we've done so far. We have backing from some of the biggest rail companies in the UK, Network Rail, Alstom, Avanti. And we've done it with one school. We're doing it with 10 schools now, and the plan is to scale it to 1,000 schools.
Wow.
By 2023. So that's going to be a challenge.
A big year, no, but it's an exciting one though. Well, Alex, we're coming to the end of our session, and I just wanted to, after quite a few, I know time flies. Wow. I just want to ask you about kind of through the experiences that you've gone through, going from a very social degree to coming back to technology, to realizing the challenges of education, to realizing the kind of the I might phrase it as existential crises that are emerging from the different things that are happening in the future. How would you reassure yourself or the students that are listening today about, what the future of work will look like for them and how the world will be, and what they can be doing now, or to be able to survive and thrive in that sort of economy?
I think that's a very good question, and that's something I think personally I'm still trying to figure out myself.
Mm,
There's a lot of, as a company founder, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of things to kind of keep in mind. And being starting a company right out of university, I had no idea what I was doing. So there was a constant process of trying to reassure myself that this is worth doing. I
mm,
don't need to do something else to whatever. Um, so I would recommend to stay curious
mhm.
always, and be open to learning new things. By far, I think the most important skill that we're going to need over the next 50 years is to adapt and to be able to learn things quickly, and process things quickly. Where the traditional educational system is kind of geared towards remembering things because there was no internet to quickly kind of search things when you needed it.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the focus is transitioning towards processing things quickly and being able to kind of fit things as you go along, fit things into your own mind map of how the world works. So if you're able to kind of stay curious and keep that drive and eagerness to learn, you're going to position yourself um, very well for the future. And it's also going to help you in your own personal struggles or your personal evolution, um, to continuously reassure yourself that what you're doing is the right thing and you're on the right track.
Stay curious always. Thank you so much, Alex. It's been a pleasure having you. I hope you have a lovely
Thank you,
trip,
Zubair.
and we'll speak soon.
Speak soon. Take care.
Bye.